Today we'll be talking about partial rotator cuff tears, classification, types and etiopathogenesis. Now when we look at the footprint, the insertional footprint is demonstrated in this picture, and usually it is around 17 to 23 millimeters wide. So it is around 2 centimeters of wide footprint of the supraspinatus, and it may be torn in a partial manner either from an articular side or a bursal side, leading to a partial thickness tear. Now this is a very good paper from Sugaya in Japan, which changed our perception of humeral insertion of the supraspinatus and infraspinatus, and it shows that actually the supraspinatus occupies a very small portion on the greater tuberosity, and it also occupies a little portion on the lesser tuberosity as far as the insertional fibers are concerned, and most of the greater tuberosity is occupied by the infraspinatus tendon. Now this is a very important picture which shows that there is a zone of diminished vascularity on the articular side of the supraspinatus tendon, and this is the reason why it is a high chances of tears in this particular location. Now this is a very good coronal photomicrograph of the tendinous insertion of the supraspinatus tendon, and it shows that there is a less uniform collagen bundles on the articular side of the supraspinatus tendon, and which is also a reason of more common tears on the articular side. Now extrinsic impingement usually leads to bursal tears. The extrinsic impingement is due to narrowing of the supraspinatus outlet, and it is caused by coracoacromial arch abnormalities. And partial bursal surface tears may be more likely to be related to abrasion of the cuff by the acromion. But there is a study by Gartzman and Mill which says that extrinsic impingement can cause both articular and bursal sided tear. Also, this study is not very much substantiated. Now, partial articular sided tears can be due to internal impingement phenomenon. Now, Walsh et al. And Job had described a subset of partial articular sided rotator cuff tears which develop secondary due to internal impingement. Now, this can be because of glenohumeral instability and traction stress on the rotator cuff tears, which in throwing athlete can lead to undersurface tears in absence of extrinsic impingement. Now, throwers and other overhead athlete may experience posterior shoulder pain when repetitive contact occurs between the undersurface of supraspinatus and the posterior superior glenoid during the late cocking phase of the throwing motion. So, this is very important. Now, GIRD is because a non-specific posterior shoulder pain. And what is GIRD? GIRD is basically the reduced internal rotation at the expense of an increased external rotation, and it is usually seen in throwing athletes, and it is associated with partial thickness rotator cuff tears, and this usually causes a contracture which leads to an obligate increase in external rotation, and here the cuff abrates against the posterior superior glenoid rim, and the posterior superior labral tears and slab tears are more common in throwing athletes, and it predisposes to articular sided partial thickness rotator cuff tears. Now, important things to note is that a high age, a larger initial size tear, and an absence of traumatic episode are poor prognostic factors. That means that traumatic partial tears have a good healing rate. So if the tear is atraumatic, then the healing rates are low. Now, Ellman classifies partial rotator cuff tears into grade 1, 2 and 3. Grade 1 is less than 3 millimeters, grade 2 is 3 to 6 millimeters, and grade 3 is more than 6 millimeters. Now, this is a slide from Shoulder Doc in which they show that articular sided tears grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3, and bursal side also grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3. Grade 1 is less than 1/4 thickness, that is less than 3 millimeters. Grade 2 is less than half of the thickness, that is 3 to 6 millimeters, and grade 3 is more than half of thickness, that is more than 6 millimeter of thickness. Now, what is the natural history of a partial rotator cuff tear? Now, Yamanaka studied 40 patients of symptomatic articular sided tears, partial thickness tears, and these were treated non-operatively with serial arthrography, and it was followed up with more than 1 year of follow-up, that is about approximately 13 months of follow-up. and it shows that around 10% tears healed over a period of time completely, and 10% of the tears reduced over the period of the time. So overall 20% had an improvement, but 80% had a gradual worsening of the tear. Around 28% of them proceeded to a full thickness tear, whereas around 51% of them proceeded to increase in the size. They remained partial thickness tears only, but they increased in the size. Now this is a MRI picture in which it is showed that there is a subacromial and subdeltoid bursitis with inferior acromial osteophytes. Now rotator cuff tendon tears can be partial thickness in 55% of patients, and partial thickness tears can be classified in a bursal sided tear, an interstitial tear, or an articular sided tear. And usually on practical standpoint, if it is less than 50%, it is usually treated with debridement. If it is more than 50%, it is usually treated with repair. Now this is a MRI picture of a partial thickness bursal rotator cuff tear, and this is a MR picture of a partial thickness avulsion of a supraspinatus tendon. Now what is the prevalence? Based on the cadaveric and imaging studies, the prevalence is around 13 to 32%. The overall prevalence in asymptomatic individual is close to around 20%. If it is less than 40 year age, the partial thickness tears are seen in around 4% of patients. If it is more than 60 years age, the prevalence is around 26%. The age-related difference in prevalence was supported by Migliomet et al. Also, and usually, if in between age of 40 to 60, the prevalence is around 5 to 11%. In patients aged more than 70%, the prevalence is around 80%. And there is a linear increase in prevalence of rotator cuff tears after the 5th decade of life. Now coming to biochemistry, SMA, that is the smooth muscle actin, has been found in the non-vascular connective tissue cells immediately surrounding the torn rotator cuff edges. So SMA in vitro leads to contraction of collagen glycan compounds, which is found in substantial concentrations in the rotator cuff. So in vivo, this may translate into SMA cells, causing damaged rotator cuff to retract with increasing distance in the repair margin, which results in inhibitions of healing. So what it means is that SMA reduces the healing phenomenon and it causes progression of the tear over time. Now, role of altered collagen. Normally, supraspinatus tendon is made up of type 1 collagen, and it has smaller amounts of type 3 collagen, which is usually seen. Now, at the insertion point, it is a fibrocartilaginous zone, which is usually type 2 collagen, which is a collagen subtype associated with withstanding the compressive loads. Now, in a diseased rotator cuff, there is an increase in level of type 3 collagen within the fibrocartilaginous zone, a collagen subtype which is associated with tendon healing, and decrease in type 2 collagen. So this change in collagen composition reduces the tendon's ability to withstand the compressive loads traditionally with type 2 collagen. Now, if you have to assess the intertendinous tear, you can use either a methylene blue dye, which is called as a Fukuda color test, in which you put dye into the intra-articular part, and the part of the dye may leak into the laminas onto the bursal side. Or you can do a suture marking test, which is called as a Snyder's suture technique. The most commonly used technique which I use is a bubble sign, or which was described by Jan Lowe and Steve Burkhardt, which is called as a bubble sign, and it is usually done from the articular aspect, in which we instill a saline through an injection through a needle into the lamina, and there will be a bubble kind of a indentation which we see in an interstitial tear. Now, acromial spurs must always be seen, because acromial spur versus ossification of CA ligament is a common cause of bursal sided tears. This was a case which was a diabetic patient, in which we see that not only there is a spur, but whole of the coracoacromial ligament is ossified, and we need to remove this ossification to actually improve the condition of this particular patient. and this is called as a coracoacromial arch impingement. Whole of the arch is causing impingement on the bursal surface tear. Now this is a subscapularis tendon. On preliminary examination it looks normal, but what is very very significant here, which you can see, is increased vascularity on the articular side, and when we see there is a hypervascular response which is suggestive of a healing response of a bursal sided articular sided subscapularis tear, and this is a partial thickness subscapularis tear on the articular side, and when we pull it we see that this is a normal level of the subscapularis tendon. Now we insert a tendon here and we repair it through a penetrating suture kind of a device, and slowly each one of these is removed. The threads are removed and threads are tied on an extra articular fashion, leading to a good repair of a partial thickness subscapularis tendon. And here we see that this is the part of the tendon which is normal in this zone. Now this is a video of a partial bursal tear. Now this patient is a 40-year-old young patient who present to us with a cricketing injury. He is a fast bowler and he had a cricketing injury with injury to the bursal sided tear. So when we do an intra-articular arthroscopy, we find that intra-articular everything was normal, the labrum was intact, same the rotator cuff was also intact. But on the bursal side, we see that whole of the single lamina, the bursal lamina of the supraspinatus tendon is torn, and we repaired this with a single row Mason-Allen technique. In this particular case, we are using a helix anchor for repair, and this is a helix inserter which we are using, and we make a pilot hole of the helix anchor and we are inserting the helix anchor. This helix anchor is a cortico-cancellous anchor with differential pitch, so it has a cortical threads and cancellous threads, and it is a double loaded anchor, and we insert this anchor at the level, and then we will use an anti-grade kind of a suture passing device. In this case we are using a Scorpion kind of a suture passing device. You can use an Expressive or any of these particular devices, and here so there are two threads, and one of these threads is passed in a mattress fashion and the other thread is passed in a simple fashion, and then we will repair it. And so one thread will be repaired in a mattress fashion and the one thread will be repaired in single fashion, and this is called as a Mason-Allen kind of a repair. So this is a loop which is from the first suture, which is taken out with the suture loop. So this is the first suture which is taken out from here. Then this is the second suture which is taken out, and then we will pass the third suture. The third suture is again the first suture, that is the purple suture which is passed. The blue suture will be tied as a simple suture and the purple suture will be tied as a mattress suture. So this is the blue suture which has been tied as a simple suture, and then the purple suture will also be tied. So once it is tied, it's a nice repair, and usually these patients can be mobilized very fast because these are partial tears. You don't need to immobilize them for long, because if you immobilize them for long, they may cause stiffness over a period of time. So usually these patients can be mobilized pretty quickly, and usually they can attain their pre-injury level if they do a good and a rigorous post-operative rehabilitation. So this is the final repair, and if needed you can do a little bit of subacromial decompression. Now is in situ repair. In situ repair is usually done in partial articular sided tears in which the torn lamina, which is the articular lamina, is only the lamina which is repaired. And in this particular technique we usually keep the bursal lamina intact. We put one anchor on the articular side and try to repair the torn lamina with the intact bursal lamina itself. So we put the anchor on the exposed articular footprint, and then we used suture passing device, like you can use a banana lasso, or you can use your ideal suture shuttles or some kind of penetrating suture device to pass through the articular sided lamina. So this is again a anchor which is inserted on the articular aspect, and threads which are passed through the bursal lamina. This is a video of articular-sided repair in which about 50% of the articular-sided footprint is exposed. We put one anchor out of it, and then we insert the anchor through the small nick in the supraspinatus tendon, and then we'll use a anterior portal to use the sutures for the suture management, and then the threads are usually taken out through the anterior portal, and then they are just pulled with the anterior portal, and then we will use a penetrating kind of a device which will pass through the articular lamina and which will grasp the suture limbs. So this is a penetrating suture device which will grasp the lamina one by one and which will take the suture out on the subacromial space. Now this is the finalized repair. A good trick here is to do a good subacromial decompression before you start your repair anteriorly. So in situ repair is a good technique, but unfortunately we have seen that it does not give a very good result. So this was also followed up by a study, and it shows that 41% of patients has residual symptoms and complaints of discomfort at the end range of motion and during daily activities, which requires full abduction and internal rotation of the shoulder. And usually these patients with residual symptoms were the same patients with older age, atraumatic onset of symptoms, and has increased tendon retraction with minimal footprint exposure at the surgery. And this residual pain is usually multifactorial in nature. It is probably due to over-tensioning or inappropriate tensioning of the remaining fibers of the rotator cuff to the greater tuberosity, that is the bursal surface versus the articular surface tendon mismatch. So this is one of the common feature which we see in situ repairs. Therefore, in present practice, my rate of in situ repair has decreased over a period of time. Nowadays, I more commonly prefer completion of the tear from the bursal side and doing a standard double row or the standard kind of a rotator cuff repair as compared to a in situ repair. So in a nutshell, we can see that partial rotator cuff tendon tears are a subgroup which is quite a broad subgroup. One should not jump into operating these cases. These cases can be treated conservatively in most of these cases. If you don't have an adequate recovery after a conservative management, you can go ahead and go for a surgical management. Our indication for surgical intervention is more liberal with the partial bursal tears, in which we usually recommend a surgical intervention and repair of the bursal lamina. In the partial articular sided tears, we are more conservative and we usually give a conservative trial to the patients. But if the tear is more than 50% and the symptoms are not responding, then we can go ahead for an operative intervention. If you have any questions regarding a partial rotator cuff, you can put it on the comment box. Thank you.